and it's been an honor to serve as the Assembly member for the 65th District of Lower Manhattan. Since you elected me in 2016, we've accomplished so much together for our working families. Together, we passed the strongest tenant protection laws in a generation. We increased education funding by billions for our public schools, and we passed the Reproductive Health Act and the Child Victims Act to protect women and survivors of sexual abuse. We delivered millions in funding for senior care and for our naturally occurring retirement communities to ensure that our seniors have the quality care that they deserve in neighborhoods that we all call home. We secured historic funding for NYCHA, funding that will provide the needed capital funds to improve the deplorable conditions of our public housing. We've made more progress in the past 4 years than we have in decades in the legislature, but there is still much more work to be done. This current public health crisis and fight against police brutality has shined a light on the ways in which our system has been designed to fail working families and our communities of color, and how we must fight for truly progressive structural change, transformative change. I'm calling for a New Deal recovery from this pandemic by implementing comprehensive measures to address our public health crisis, bolster our social safety net, and help individuals and small businesses recover. We need to suspend rent and implement a rent freeze for tenants and small businesses. We also need to fight to provide free medical essentials to frontline workers and to eliminate copays on treatment and medication. Recently, through protests, solidarity, and activism, we were able to place our nation's eyes on the issue of systemic racism and oppression and vote to pass sweeping prison and criminal justice reform to better protect our communities of color. It's hard. It isn't perfect, and we still need teeth, but I have hope that our work today will set the foundation for rebuilding our community from the ground up. Finally, we need to fight back against decades of austerity budgeting that has led us to our systems collapsing on working families by passing progressive revenue-generating bills such as the millionaire's tax and the stock buyback tax to ensure the wealthy pay their fair share in supporting our working families and our state. We deserve better as a community. We deserve better as New York, and I will always be committed to fighting to make sure that our voices are heard. Thank you all for your continued support, and we will continue our fight for progress together. I will continue to fight for us. Vote for me, Yuh-line Niou, on June 23rd.
Hi, my name is Grace Lee, and I'm running to be the next State Assembly member of the 65th District in Lower Manhattan. I'm a community activist, a small business owner, and a mother of 3 girls. Today, we face a public health and economic crisis like we've never seen before. As a New Yorker and Lower Manhattan resident, I've lived through other crises in New York City: 9/11, the 2008 financial crisis, and Superstorm Sandy. I've raised my family here. I've built a small business down here, and I've led the charge against corporate greed and corruption to protect our community. We need a leader with my experience and my personal connections to this community to help get us through this crisis today. For the last 1.5 years, I have been fighting a toxic cleanup site across from my daughter's school in the South Street Seaport. This site used to be the site of the largest thermometer factory in the country, producing over 600,000 thermometers a year. That's a whole lot of mercury, and there were no laws to protect children from sites like this. I co-founded a parent-led coalition called Children First to help demand the highest degree of accountability by our state agencies and the developer involved. Together, we've saved hundreds of children and thousands of residents from being unnecessarily exposed to toxic chemicals. Through this experience, I witnessed how our electeds were not willing to take a proactive stance to protect our community. And I decided that if they're not going up to Albany to fight for our children, to fight for our community, then somebody else has to go up to Albany to do it. I'm going to go to Albany and help get it done. I'm running for State Assembly for 3 reasons: to protect our children, to fight for the opportunities our working families need, and to get the job done that's not getting done right now. My name is Grace Lee, and I'm running for State Assembly in the 65th District, and I hope to earn your vote on June 23rd, 2020.
Welcome to Represent NYC election coverage, brought to you by Manhattan Neighborhood Network in partnership with the League of Women Voters of New York State. I'm Ben Max, Executive Editor of Gotham Gazette. You can find our work at gothamgazette.com. We're pleased to bring you a debate in the Democratic primary in the 65th Assembly District in Manhattan. The primary is happening this month of June, with early voting underway already from June 13th through the 21st. And primary day is June 23rd. All eligible Democrats can vote in this primary and many others across the city for state legislature, Congress, and more, and there are a small number of primaries in other political parties. Also, because of the coronavirus pandemic, the governor issued an order allowing all eligible voters to vote by absentee ballot in this month's primaries. So take advantage of that if you prefer. The 65th Assembly District includes parts or all of Lower Manhattan neighborhoods, including the Lower East Side, Chinatown, South Street Seaport area, the Financial District, Battery Park City, and it also includes Governor's Island. There are 150 assembly seats across the state, and the Assembly is the lower house of the state's two-house legislature, which also includes the state Senate. All 213 seats in the legislature are on the ballot every 2 years. So here we are this year. There are two candidates seeking your vote in the 65th Assembly District Democratic primary, and they're both with us here over Zoom. Joining me today is the incumbent Assemblymember Yuh-line Niou, and her challenger is business owner and activist Grace Lee. Thank you for being here. The format of this 30-minute debate is as follows. Each candidate will have up to 2 minutes to answer each question, and about a minute if there's rebuttals needed or some open discussion after each candidate gives an answer. Some of the questions I ask will try to have an open discussion after each candidate gives an initial response. There will also be a lightning round towards the end of the debate where I'll try to ask a series of yes or no or short answer type questions just to try to give voters even more information about your positions, proposals, and approach to being an elected member of the State Assembly in this fairly short amount of time that we have. We're not doing opening statements, but at the end of the debate, each candidate will give a 1-minute closing statement. Also, candidates, just so you know up front, as we reach the end of your time to answer, I'll try to just say a gentle thank you and then give you a few more seconds to wrap up before jumping back in to move things along. And I also might jump in here or there during or toward the end of an answer to ask you for clarification or specifics if something seems a little confusing or vague. I'll try not to do that too much, but don't be surprised if I kind of jump in and just say, can we have an example or what do you mean by that? Please don't interrupt each other. You can always spend the beginning of your next turn responding to something that you previously heard from your opponent. I'll alternate who answers first, though it won't always be back and forth like that because we don't want to get into a set pattern with just two candidates of somebody always getting to go first. So let's get started. For the first question, we're going to start with Ms. Lee and then go to Assemblymember Niou. So we want to talk about experience first. Ms. Lee, why are you seeking elected office and what experience makes you the right candidate to move this Assembly District forward? Go ahead.
Thank you, Ben, for giving me the opportunity to be here today to share my vision with all the voters in the district. My name is Grace Lee. I'm a small business owner. I'm a community activist and a mom of 3. And for the last year and a half, I've been fighting a toxic cleanup site across my daughter's school in the South Street Seaport. A developer purchased the lot and we learned that it was the former site of the largest thermometer factory in the country, producing over 600,000 thermometers a year. That's a whole lot of mercury, and there are no laws to protect children from sites like this. So my mom friends and I co-founded a parent-led coalition called Children First to help call for the highest degree of accountability by our state agencies and the developer involved in this project. Through this, I saw a lack of proactive action by our state legislators to fight for this community and decided if they're not going up to Albany to fight for our families, then somebody else has to go up to Albany to do it. But now, I never thought that I would be running as a candidate in the middle of a pandemic. We're facing one of the worst public health and economic crises of our lifetime. I'm a small business owner. I have an economics degree from Columbia, an MBA in finance, and I believe this is the type of experience that we need right now to help pull us out of this crisis. I am a 20-year resident of New York City. I was here on 9/11. I was here during the 2008 financial crisis, and I was here during Superstorm Sandy, living in Zone A with a 9-month-old baby. I understand the urgency of this crisis. I understand the complexities of this crisis, and I have a vision for how we can recover from it. Thank you, and I hope to earn everyone's vote on June 23rd.
Thank you. So Assemblymember Niou, you're obviously running for re-election. Tell voters why you deserve another term in office. What are some accomplishments that you've had? Any things you've tried to pass but been frustrated by but are still pushing on? What do you plan to do if given another term?
So, I mean, I think that, we know that the last couple of years have been really, really exciting. We've actually passed landmark legislation, actually, in our body, especially in 2019. We did the DREAM Act, we did the driver's license bill, we did bail reform, we've worked on the Child Victims Act, which is deeply personal to me. We've worked on a Green New Deal. We've increased, protections for victims of sexual harassment. We've done the Reproductive Health Act. We put in stronger gun laws. I mean, the list can go on and on and on and on. But the biggest thing that I want to say for me is the fact that, I've had over 15 years of state legislative experience. And I think that it's really important that, especially now when we are looking for making sure that we have good representation and strong representation and a fighting chance at making sure that we are seeking progress. Because in this time of COVID, in this time when there's been so much apparent now about the things that we've been fighting for that have been correct and the things that we have passed that have been, lacking, I think that more than ever, we need to make sure that we have good representation. It's so key. One of the biggest things that has been happening, obviously, has been that in my district, we have had 2 epidemics, right? We have had the virus itself, and then we've also had the virus of racism and anti-Asian sentiment that has been plaguing some of our small businesses since February. And so it's really hard to make sure that folks are getting that recovery that they need. Some of the things that I have been pushing for, such as the CDFI fund, such as, so the New York Community Development Financial Institutions Fund, we are one of the only states that has a CDFI fund specifically for our state, and yet we've never funded it till now. If we had funded it when I had first proposed it, it would have been much stronger, and we could have had that, network of small community development financial institutions to be able to actually make sure that the PPP, for example, was doled out much more fairly.
Thank you.
There's a lot of things like that.
We're going to come back on small businesses in a few minutes, so we'll hear maybe more about your plans on that. Just quick follow-ups on the opening statements. Let's stick with you, Assemblymember Niou. You have a reputation for a lot of independence, for being outspoken, but it also at times obviously ruffles the feathers of some people in leadership, the governor perhaps. Talk a little bit about how you brought that style to the assembly and whether you've been effective in it in getting your priorities to move. Why don't you take just a minute on that to follow up a little bit more about the style you brought, and then we'll go to Ms. Lee about what her style would be like.
Sure. I think that for me, I am all about transparency and honesty and accountability. And so the things that I care about are making sure that my constituents actually have a very real and dynamic voice that will represent the things that they care about, period. And I don't work for the leadership. I don't work for, anybody else but my constituents. And so every single bill that we've sponsored has been because of our constituents. Every single time that we are taking constituent casework, and trust me, we have a lot of constituent casework and we're well known for it, it's because of those cases that we are actually fighting so hard for the things that we need. I know that, yes, I voted no on the budget. Yes, I voted no on giving the governor extraordinary powers. I voted no on making sure that we didn't pass this austerity budget that hurt us so much because, we are cutting healthcare during a global pandemic. We are cutting education when kids need school. We are making these choices that are bad decisions. And so we need to make sure that we're passing good policy and protective policy and policies that make it so that people can actually get the things that they need. And yes, I know that sometimes it ruffles feathers. And yes, I know sometimes it's not easy to do. But at the same time, I feel like we need to actually represent the people that we serve, and we have to move that dialogue.
So Ms. Lee, in just a minute, if you're elected, what kind of style would you have in terms of how you integrate yourself into state government, into the assembly majority, into your work with the legislature and the executive branch?
As a small business owner, as someone who has worked in finance, I have a lot of experience organizing, working with a limited amount of resources to help get things done. And as an organizer in the community, I have helped to further the agenda of the people and to fight against real estate developers in the process. And I think that having this ability to demonstrate leadership in the community is critical to being an effective legislator up in Albany. When I am up in Albany, I will not take votes such as voting against $40 million of coronavirus aid, like my opponent did earlier at the beginning of this pandemic, to restrict hospitals from receiving PPE and ventilators to help them get through this crisis. I will not vote no against $100 million of rent relief for families 4 days before rent is due. Right now, during this crisis, bad judgment and poor leadership can cost New Yorkers their lives. We need strong leadership from people who are not going to play petty political games for their own political ambition, but are going to take votes that help to further the best interests of our community.
So my next question is going to be on the recovery from the COVID crisis and all of its various fallouts. But as we segue into that, Ms. Niou, why don't you take a minute to respond to some of that? In your last answer, you talked about voting no on some of these things, and you seem to be proud of those votes, and Ms. Lee is saying those were misguided votes. Are those symbolic votes, knowing that those, the budget's going to pass, that the relief is going to pass, but you're trying to make a certain statement in those instances? Or, explain a little bit more about some of those big no votes that you've taken.
Sure. So for our budget, we were actually only one vote away from actually voting it down. So I don't think that it was necessarily something that was symbolic. It was actually purposeful, because we needed to make sure that we are holding our government accountable to our health. And I want to say also for the other vote on PPEs, our healthcare chairs both voted no. Why? Because it gave extraordinary powers to the governor. And in times of panic, a lot of times, we see it on the federal level, we see it all over the place. In times of panic, people give up power, and it's really hard to get back. And I think that's really, really important to make sure that we are the legislature and that we legislate. I think that that's our jobs, and we need to take it seriously. And this is something that right now we are seeing that there has been mistakes made. Right now, we are seeing even bigger cuts. We are seeing bigger cuts that are being proposed. And I will say this, that every single editorial that came out after that vote to give the governor extraordinary powers agreed with me.
All right, so let's talk a little bit more about the process of recovering here from this crisis, which has many tentacles to it. It's not just a public health crisis. Obviously, there's a lot of socioeconomic issues with it, including mass unemployment and businesses shut down and more. So let's start with Ms. Lee and then go to Ms. Niou here. In terms of what's come out of Albany so far to deal with this crisis, can you give an evaluation of that? What do you think about what the legislature and the governor have done so far, and what else you think needs to be done going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I just want to make one point really quickly of what my opponent said about the budget, that I agree that I would not have voted yes on that budget. And there are a lot of things that were missing that I would have liked to have seen. And I think it's interesting that she talks about how she voted against the governor's extraordinary powers, but then at the same time contradicted herself in an article saying that she thought the governor was doing a good job through this crisis. So I just want to point that out. But outside of that, I think that pandemic recovery is critical to anyone who's going up to Albany right now. One thing that I think was severely lacking was an increase in tax revenue by taxing the wealthy. This is the first this is the first crisis in New York State where we have not taxed the ultra wealthy to help compensate for budget losses. And I think as a legislator, I will go up to fight to pass a tax on the ultra wealthy, on millionaires and billionaires, and to help to pass the pied-à-terre tax currently in legislation. Other things that we need to be thinking about. When I think about recovery from the pandemic, I think about it in three forms: relief, reform, and recovery. On the relief side, it's time for bold policies. We need to be looking to pass the New York Health Act to provide universal health care to all New Yorkers. We need to institute a universal basic income, $2,000 for every New Yorker. On the reform side, we need to be able to reopen New York in a way that is going to be safe and healthy for all those who are involved. We need sustainable levels of PPE. We need business practices that help protect not only business workers, but also our community, as well as a broad contact tracing and testing program that really works to help to stymie any outbreaks. And finally, on the recovery side, I just want to say that we really need to be investing in new jobs. There are 40 to 50% of businesses have been closed, may not reopen, and we need to invest in public works projects and other programs that help get people back to work.
Just quickly, Ms. Lee, you mentioned the idea of raising taxes to make up for tax revenue shortfalls that are potentially crushing the state's finances. The governor seems more inclined to have the state borrow to cover operating expenses. How do you feel about that, very briefly?
I think that we need to be looking at all avenues for revenue increases right now. I don't think that it can be done by one particular solution. It's going to have to come from multiple things. It's going to have to come from federal aid, from raising taxes, and from borrowing.
So Ms. Niou, in terms of evaluating what you and your colleagues and the governor have done so far, what do you think of that, and what else needs to be done?
I've been very critical about the austerity budget. I've been very critical about not actually doing a investment into our infrastructure. I mean, I agree with the facts that, we need to make sure that we have universal health care. We see the countries that are doing it so much better right now and have fared a lot better. Taiwan for one, and Singapore for another. And I think that it's really important that we are actually, looking into investing in our infrastructure and making sure that we are actually getting the help that we need. I think that it's been very critical that we have a more robust healthcare system, a more robust transportation system, a more robust education system, a more robust system of being able to have a fairer criminal justice system, and I think that it's been very telling right now. I always say this, that COVID has shined a light on all of the things that we need to do. I talk about it in my budget speech. I talked about how we needed to raise revenue, what we needed to raise, and how we could do it. A multimillionaire's tax, a stock buyback transfer tax, which is my bill, making sure that we actually are taxing the wealthy and making sure that we are actually fighting for that revenue in order to be able to have economic justice and budget justice as a whole. I think that it's been a it's very interesting because I think that in the same article that my opponent was quoting, it was a Business Insider article, which basically it said that I felt like he was doing a good job, but there was also a but. And so there was just a couple of things that I felt like was very important to mention, and the austerity budgeting is one of them. The thing that we need to do as New Yorkers is to fight for the things that are happening on the budget justice side, right? There's a law, Silver v. Pataki, right? There was a decision. Silver v. Pataki makes it so that the governor has so much more power during the budgeting process, right? And everybody knows that if we don't vote for a budget, then there's a chance that government could shut down, right? And so that is making it so that there is a huge imbalance of powers that makes it so that we are limited in our budgeting decisions. What we shouldn't be doing is what we're actually doing, which is pulling funds from the biggest pots within our budget. And those pots are, of course, healthcare, education, transportation, and housing. And I think if we're pulling from the pots that are the biggest, we have to ask, what are the biggest? Why are they the biggest? The biggest is because it's the most important. And so we have to make sure to keep those pots full.
So I've heard you both say you're in favor of raising some taxes on higher income folks. That has actually been part of the Assembly Democratic platform for a while, pandemic or no pandemic, recession or no recession. Ms. Niou, just quickly in follow-up, why hasn't the Assembly majority been able to move that ahead? And I haven't really heard the Speaker of the Assembly pushing hard for that amid this crisis. Can you give some insights into why that isn't your conference's, a high priority for your conference?
I would say that it is a high priority for many of the members in the conference. One of them is me. I have been pushing forward this revenue package for a while now. We've been trying to make sure that we are raising revenue in all of these different ways. But at the same time, I think that there's a lack of a discussion on the floor. I think that we need to have that discussion. There are only a couple of ways to be able to raise revenue for the state. We can't print money like the federal government. And so we need to make those decisions now, to tax or to bond.
So we're going to go on to a new round of question here. And we're actually going to start with Ms. Lee again. I'm trying to just make sure we bounce back and forth a bit so nobody's waiting too long to talk. So obviously, the other major issue that's been gripping the city, gripping the country, has been police reform, systemic racism, police brutality. Just speak a little bit about what you think needs to be done to combat the issues that people have been protesting in the streets about, where you stand in this discussion in terms of how the NYPD polices New York City. Obviously, in the state legislature, you don't have as much say on what happens with the NYPD as, say, the mayor or the city council, but of course you do have some oversight and powers. So what do you think about that? And if you want to expand it, Ms. Niou mentioned racism and xenophobia that of course is extended to your district in a bit of a different direction than the people, protesting in the streets about. But if you want to extend your answer to also include, what needs to be done to combat that in your district, that'd be great too. So go ahead, Ms. Lee, and let me know if you need me to rephrase that. I know that was a long question.
Yeah, that was a long question. Thank you. I think that what we've been seeing in the streets is, what's been happening in the streets has been inspiring, but also has weighed heavily on on all of New Yorkers. And it's a long time coming to be calling to fight the systemic racism that exists in our city, state, and country. The way that we've seen the NYPD militarize against peaceful protesters, denying them their right to peacefully protest, to their constitutional right to freedom of speech, is unacceptable. And through this process, we are, as well as at not only the state level, at the city level, and scrutinizing our budget. And every city agency is looking at severe budget cuts. And I think it's unacceptable that NYPD budget remains at $6 billion. We need to defund the NYPD and reallocate those funds and reinvest them into communities of color who have been most affected by over-policing. Our police officers are not mental health experts, they are not social workers, and they are not education experts. And they should not serve as them. We need to reallocate this money to resources and to the experts who can address these societal issues.
When you say defund NYPD, $6 billion annual budget, do you have a sense of what percentage of that you think needs to be moved out of the PD and into social services and other services?
I know that the council speaker and the mayor are talking about 6 to 7%. I haven't drilled down into the numbers, but I would be happy to see more of that. We're looking at massive cuts to healthcare and education and right now in the budget, places where we absolutely need to be investing more money. So, I'm happy to, see more out of that.
Ms. Niou?
So I actually think that, we have passed a lot on the state level. Obviously, repeal 50A was a really big piece. We've been trying to make sure that we are doing criminal justice reform, obviously, but there's also things that we haven't done, like halt solitary. We need to make sure that we are halting solitary confinement. We need to make sure that we are, stopping that horrible loitering law that is out there, which we call the Walking While Trans bill. I think that it's really important that we pass these pieces of legislation legislation and others like it to really kind of dismantle what our system is like and really kind of rebuild into a more fair and just society. I think that right now we are seeing, and I say this all the time, again, I feel like I'm repeating myself all the time because I talk about it, but our systems are not broken the way that people say they're broken. Right? These are not systems that are broken. These are not things that need band-aids. You know, these are not things that need to be fixed. Our system is working exactly the way that it was designed to work. Our system is working the way that it was designed, which is racist, right? Our system is designed racist, and it helps particular groups of people, and it hurts other people that way that the wealthiest people can benefit and the poorest people are getting hurt. Like, we are watching as 25 of the richest billionaires in the world are getting richer, while all of my constituents are falling into a deeper pot of debt, right? I think that we cannot not talk about the fact that everything is interconnected. If you cannot pay your rent, you cannot pay your healthcare, you cannot put food on the table, you're not able to make ends meet. You're not able to survive this. And everybody always says, you know, oh, you know, we're all in the same boat together and we're gonna get through this. And it's just like, well, actually, no, we're in the same storm, but we're not in the same boat. Everybody has different things, you know. Some people have yachts, some people have dinghies, some people have a life raft, right? It's not the same. And so we're gonna be coming out of everything differently. And I think that right now, we're asking for justice. We're asking for somebody to fight, to make sure that we're tearing apart some of these, you know, institutions, the way that our entire system is built, and make it so that we are actually anti-racist.
Thank you.
We need to close the racial wealth gap. Every single policy that we are putting out there, we need to ask, does this close the racial wealth gap?
Thank you. So let's stick with you, Ms. Niou, to start this round. And I want to give you a chance. You know, there's so many different things, obviously, we're not going to get to. There's only so many questions we have in a half an hour. But is there one or two priorities on topics that we haven't gotten to in this discussion yet? And we still have a little bit more time, but not much. Are there one or two other priorities, whether it's related to immigrants, housing, homelessness, NYCHA, other issues where you want to make sure that voters hear you during this debate say, these are two of my other priorities? Go ahead.
So I have been working at the forefront of fully funding NYCHA. Everybody knows that, you know, I've been the person who has been carrying that letter, making sure that we are getting funds for our, you know, public housing. And it's been incredibly difficult because during this time, we were actually almost in the middle of getting NYCHA billions of dollars in our budget. I kid you not, the conversation was so close. And yet, when COVID happened, when COVID struck, the discussions were let go. And I think that that was something that was very, very disturbing to me and something that was very disappointing. I have been a part of the leadership of the the folks who have been pushing for the strongest rent protections in our state. Obviously, I have a bill that makes it so that we can actually have real protections also on rent for New Yorkers. And I think that it's really interesting that that, you know, we didn't decide to do more.
Which bill? Sorry.
So my cancel rent bill, the rent forgiveness bill, which also has a small landlord component that makes it so that landlords will get reimbursed through a federal program. So the bill that was passed, obviously, I voted against, and you know, I think it's really important that we talk about the fact that that only helps big landlords, and it also doesn't give a lot of protections. It only gives $100 million, which is, by the way, maybe 25,000 households in New York. I just want to make a point that 2 million people, 2 million new people filed for unemployment. That is not even a drop in the bucket of what we need. That means that not even that's like 1% of the households that have filed for unemployment will be able to get any kind of relief, which is why, you know, it's so important that we fight for more. We have to fight for better. We have to fight for all New Yorkers.
Thank you. Ms. Lee, one or two other priorities that you want to make sure anybody watching this debate knows that you would be going to Albany to fight for?
My top three priorities, apart from pandemic recovery, are fully funding NYCHA and fully funding our education system. And I would just speak to my opponent, talking about how she's been an advocate for NYCHA. I think when you're in the district talking to attendant leaders, that contradicts with how they feel about her representation. I am proud to have, to have the support of many NYCHA Attendant Association leaders in this district because they feel that their voice is not being heard in Albany, that they don't have the representation that they deserve. I also appreciate that my opponent talked about her cancel rent bill because it didn't include NYCHA. And I was the first one to call to cancel NYCHA rent for anyone who's affected by the pandemic because the federal government should support those residents above and beyond all. In addition, I want to be, again, fighting for ultra millionaires tax. I'm going to fight for a pied-à-terre tax to have those funds redistributed back into communities of color. I think that they should go to help to bridge the gap in the budget hole for fully funding NYCHA and the capital improvements there. Finally, my other priority is fully funding public education. We know that, our public education system is owed billions of dollars and we need to get that back into the system. And, as a mother of three, I want to make sure that every child has the opportunity to have a great education.
Thank you. So we're just going to do a very quick lightning round of yes, no, or short answers, and then we'll go to closing statements. So obviously, folks watching can find a lot more information that you've put out on your websites and in articles about the race, but we're trying to give people at least some more sense of where you stand on some things. So this is going to be, kind of quick, a lightning round. Again, short answers, please. So we'll start with Ms. Niou here on the first one. Do you favor trying to institute some form of commercial rent control? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Ms. Lee?
Yes.
Ms. Niou, should parts of the district be upzoned or rezoned to allow for significantly more housing development in your district?
It depends on where, yes.
But you could see that being something you'd favor?
This is not a simple yes and no answer in my district. Obviously, my district is very large. And
but there's pieces that you could see yourself, there's parts of the district where you believe there could be more housing built, rezonings, upzonings for more housing?
There could be more housing built, but I think that the zoning has been okay.
Okay. Ms. Lee, on that question?
I support the Chinatown Working Group rezoning plan, and I would want to limit how high we can go in certain areas of our district.
Okay. In NYCHA, in the NYCHA turnaround plan that the mayor has released, it calls for building what typically is referred to as infill housing development. Ms. Lee, we'll start with you on this one. Do you support building a mix of affordable and market rate housing on underused NYCHA land?
No.
Ms. Niou?
No.
You've both said you support the New York Health Act, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. You've both said you think that taxes should be raised on higher income New Yorkers. Is there an income threshold that you would set, a ballpark figure of what you think an annual income where tax rates should go up? Ms. Niou, start with you.
I would probably say around 200, 250 above.
Okay. Ms. Lee?
I'm sorry, tax rate or income level?
An income level where you believe that tax increases should start to go up.
I think it should start at the 7-figure level.
7-figure level, okay. And just a couple more here. Do you support the good cause eviction bill that's in the state legislature? We'll start with you, Ms. Lee.
Yes.
And Ms. Niou?
Yes.
Do you support legalizing the adult use of recreational marijuana, Ms. Niou?
Yes.
Ms. Lee?
Yes.
We covered a little bit of the MYP, just last two here, and we'll go to closing statements. The SAT exam for the specialized high schools, do you believe in keeping the current system, changing it, scrapping the exam? Ms. Niou, we'll start with you.
That's also a complicated answer because of the fact
Give us a short, yeah, go ahead.
I think that our school system is actually, everybody who takes the test is already part of a particular feeder system, right? We already know which middle schools are feeder schools. We already know which elementary schools are feeder schools. It's actually our entire system.
But
Just the 3 schools will be like cutting 3 leaves off of a tree with root disease,
so keep it as is, keep the exam as is while working, keep the exam as is while working on other things. Okay, Ms. Lee?
Yes,
Yes, the same.
I support keeping the SHSAT and providing more resources to our kids at all levels, all grade levels.
Last 2, should the plan to build a new jail in Lower Manhattan move forward, Ms. Lee?
No.
Ms. Niou?
No.
And lastly, just in a short sentence, what do you want to see with the future of Governor's Island, Ms. Niou?
I think that it's got an amazing start. I think that we're working on trying to make sure that we have a really fun, active place for folks to be able to go to and be part of the community. I think that it's been handled really well. I think that people are really doing a lot of really fun things there. The programming has been awesome and the board has been great.
Thank you. Ms. Lee, any different vision?
Parks and green spaces, we need more of it.
Okay. All right. Thank you both. And I know I've kept you a little bit longer than our planned time. Let's go to closing statements. We're going to start with Ms. Lee, and then Ms. Niou will take us out. Oh, well, I'll give a little goodbye after. But we're just going to do a 1-minute closing statement, your pitch to voters here who've tuned in or who are watching this on MNN. Ms. Lee, go ahead.
A year and a half ago, I discovered a toxic cleanup site across from my daughter's school in the South Street Seaport. I went to my opponent's office for help. We asked for help. And when she came back, she delivered letters and platitudes. That wasn't enough. So I organized our community. I fought back against the developers to demand safer standards so that our children could go to school safely. Standing in the room, you cannot take credit for just standing in the room. You need to lead. And when she has tried to lead, she has failed. This is a moment in time when poor judgment and bad leadership cost New Yorkers their lives. This is a woman who has voted against $40 million of coronavirus aid, has voted against $100 million of rent relief, taking it away from 25,000 families. We know we need to do more, but she tried to deny them that right as well. And she is the chair of the subcommittee for catastrophic natural disasters, has never held a single hearing. She is a woman who my opponent has taken real estate money, corporate PAC money, and lobbyist money. I am the only person in this race that has stuck to my pledge to not take real estate money. I am unbought and unbossed, and I am here because our district deserves better. We need new leadership in Albany, and I am going to deliver it to the people of this district.
Thank you. Ms. Niou, over to you on responding to some of what you just heard and any other remarks you'd like to give. And we'll just give you a minute or so to do that. Go ahead.
Am I allowed to respond to that first for a minute?
Take a few seconds. Take a few seconds to respond to a variety of texts, but we're not going to give you extra time. So go ahead.
I just feel like it's so. I'm actually very, very confused because I am the person who actually has had almost 5,000 individual donors when that's about 17 times more than my opponent, and who really believes in the values and the work that I say I do. And I think that it's so interesting that there's these strange lies that come out, and I'm just not sure because I'm just really confused as somebody who moved into the district only a year ago. I just think that it's a little bit hypocritical for somebody to talk about what they know about the district. Anyways, I just wanted to say that I don't want to belabor this point, but I just wanted to say that I have not taken any corporate money, as they call it. What I have done is take from my constituents and from individuals, and we've had almost 5,000 donors who support and who really care about making sure that we have our progressive values backed up. So for my closing statement, I just wanted to say that right now our country is facing an existential battle over our values. It's a battle of progressive change versus the regressive status quo. And it's a battle of facts versus lies. And it's a battle of helping the struggling of many versus catering to the wealthy few. And I am proud to have been on the forefront of this battle as a lifelong advocate for low-income families and as somebody working on state-level policy for over 15 years. And now as an assembly member where I delivered unprecedented progressive change for women, for immigrants, for victims of abuse, for the climate, for tenants, for victims of police brutality, for seniors, for everyone. And here in our community, we've been fighting the double fight against COVID and racism and supporting our community throughout this entire troubling time. So voting for a candidate is a values judgment. It is a choice of representation, and it is a values, and if you value progressive change, if you value a candidate funded by the grassroots people, and if you value someone working to end income inequality and racism and looking to build a future that actually holds promise for all of us, I would be honored to have your vote.
Thank you.
Ben, sorry, I just need to, I do need to do a fact check there.
No,
my
I'm
opponent
sorry,
has taken money from Ernst & Young.
We're gonna have to do the fact check elsewhere. I'm sorry, we're out of time, but both candidates had a lot of time to speak during the debate and get a lot out there. So I want to thank both of you very much. Grace Lee, Yuh-line Niou. A reminder to everyone watching, Democratic voters can vote in the 65th Assembly District of Lower Manhattan in the primary that's happening right now, with early voting ongoing and primary day June 23rd. And of course, all eligible voters can vote absentee. If you'd like to request your absentee ballot online, you have a short time still to do that at nycabsentee.com. Otherwise, find your polling place for early voting, or it can be different on primary day. And please do vote if you're eligible, both in this district and elsewhere. Thank you all for watching Represent NYC election coverage on Manhattan Neighborhood Network. I'm Ben Max from Gotham Gazette. Goodbye.